collect my thoughts. Good afternoon. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Sharon. Oh, thank you. I am from Canada. I was born and raised there, but I now live in Ohio via Cherokee, North Carolina. I'm a traveler. Don't ask me to come and visit. I may never leave. My name is Sharon. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date's February 18th, 1993. I celebrated 29 years. So I can say, look, Dad, I made it. My dad came to this convention many years ago, and he's since passed. So he told me about it, many years ago. He said, if you ever get a chance, go. He said, you'll meet a lot of inspiring people. So here I am. I couldn't sleep last night. I drank coffee. I found coffee. I have never, ever been to an AA function where there's no coffee. So when I found it, I had a big cup. And then I suffered. I couldn't sleep. I was still awake at 4 o'clock this morning, and I was like, oh my God. And, there's a 3-hour difference time from Ohio. So my body is still on Ohio time, but and here I am, So I may be a bundle of whatever comes out. And I bought my own Kleenex. I'm ready for anything. As I said, I'm from Canada. I was born on a reservation. If anybody knows the geography, North Dakota, 10 hours north of North Dakota. So it's way up there on the tundra, and it's different. I took my husband home to visit one year, and when he describes it, he said, you go until you run out of pavement, and then you bounce along on gravel. Good description, true. Anyway, when I need to do a little bit of history here, because my dad was a member of Alcoholics Anonymous until the day that he died 12 years ago. And he died with 33 years of sobriety. And he spoke at this convention. I can't remember where on the continent it was, but he spoke for this convention. And when Ken called me 2 years ago, actually, to see if I would speak at the convention, and then COVID hit. So we put everything on hold, of course. And I just wanted to thank the committee for keeping this going. I know the three of us, Randy, Patty, and I, know what it's like to be on a committee. We did the Indians in Sobriety in Cherokee, North Carolina for a number of years. And then we started the Fireside Sharing Circle, 10 years ago. And, we're also on that committee. So it's a lot of work. And, we feed people. So, that's service work. And trying to get people at 5 o'clock in the morning to come and cook breakfast. I walk around with a whip. I was watching these young ladies out there on the Fremont Avenue the other day when we were walking around, and they have their no clothes on, but they have a whip. So I was watching one of them just, I got some pointers. So look out, Cherokee, we're coming in September. Those of you who like to travel, it's a camp out at Yogi in the Smokies campground. And like I said, we've been there for 10 years. So See me after the meeting if you'd like some more information, or Patty or Randy. Okay, advertisements out of the way. My home group in Ohio is the Wednesday night closed discussion group of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we emphasize the closed discussion because, there's open meetings and there's other types of meetings, but when you come to our group, we share sobriety and, how you got sober, how you survive out there in today's world, without alcohol or drugs. And, I know when I first got sober, I was a mess and afraid. And, don't touch me or I'll, I want to thank Leon last night for, all the laughter and the fun that he put into his lead. And, Rule 62 is don't take yourself too seriously, no matter what. And my dad certainly was a jokester. If some of you women remember him, his name was Percy. He was a flirt. And he knew it, and he loved it, and he just was in there like a dirty shirt with all the women, I'm like, okay, Dad, acceptance, So, but, wherever he went, he made friends, and I've always, when I look back on my life, somehow I always aspired to be like him and to follow in his footsteps, and I didn't realize when I was 6 years old taking my first drink that I would follow him right into alcoholism. I mean, who knows about alcoholism at 6 years old, right? You just know it made me feel good, and I was so mad at him, one time when I stole some beer off him and I went and sat by the riverbank and, drank it all up, and I was so angry at him because he was, hitting on my mom, and, and that beer just gave me the courage, and I was going to go beat him up, but by the time I got home, I felt so sick. I just went to bed, And the next morning, he was like, oh, and of course, we do it again, don't we? And I learned that when you have things and other people want them, they become your friends, So I learned to make friends that way. 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, every weekend stealing beer from my parents, and that's what we did. And so, of course, when I got sober, I learned all these things, about why we do the things we do and how we learn the things we learn. And, we watch our parents, of course. So during my early years, watching my dad drink, I learned that you start off drinking, you're happy, you have fun, you party, and then you end up getting mad. And then you either end up in a fist fight or, some kind of a big argument. So that's what I did. I don't know why I was mad, but I was mad, and there you go. So of course, when you're drinking in the bars earlier, later on in life, you're the life of the party at first, and then you end up getting mad at somebody. So after a few years of that, nobody wants to really drink with you. So you have to move on. So anyway, my parents split up when I was 12 years old. My mom just didn't want to take it anymore, and she packed us up, and then we went to the residential school that my mom went to. And, she found, she needed a safe place, from my dad, who was a raging, angry alcoholic. And so we went there, and, we went to school. My mom she worked in the laundry, and the stipulation was that the three of us older children went to the dorm. So we were there in the residential school. My older brother and I and my sister next to me, we lived in the dorm. And we could not speak to my mother that whole time. We'd go to school in town, and I'm overtired, so I'm going to be emotional here. So she'd be here about that far to the seat, and we'd have to walk like this. Otherwise, we'd get beat. She would get fired. That kind of thing, you know. So we didn't speak to my mom, and that was so hard. But I knew if we left there, you know, she didn't have anywhere else to go. She'd go back with my dad, you know. So and it was so hard. My sister is 2 years younger than I am. You know, trying to explain it to a little girl like that. We can't talk to mom, you know. So we did that for a year, and then when we did go back to the city. No, my mom went back to the city with the baby, and we went back home to my grandmother's. You know, we stayed the summer for my grandmother, and you know, she drank, and she didn't speak English, which was, you know, when I grew up, I didn't know English either. But then when you grow in the city and you get beat for, you know, speaking your own language, you know, you lose it fast. So during my, you know, education in Winnipeg, I learned to speak English. And I learned to speak English well, because, you know, when you embarrass an alcoholic, you're in trouble. So somebody asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I said a dictionary. You know, so I got a dictionary for Christmas, and when I heard new words, you know, I'd be there looking in my little book and, you know, using the word properly, spelling the word properly. And, you know, everybody else was playing with, what was out that year? Chatty Cathy, I think. You know, and I was there with my dictionary. And that was okay, because I learned to speak English well, you know, and I wanted to be weller than anybody else. So that's what I did. I had, you know, you've heard of these fairy tales we grow up on, ladies. You know, it's, you know, Cinderella and Beauty and the Beast, and they're all white chicks. as you know, my teacher I met in sobriety, she was an elder in Toronto. She told me that, you know, she said, those are white chicks. Why do you want to emulate them? You know, nobody's going to come looking for you on a white horse, for heaven's sakes. That's true. But when I was, you know, younger, I believed that my Prince Charming was out there somewhere. And I got tired of waiting. So at 12 years old, I went looking. And when you don't know what you're looking for, and, you know, you think, oh, you know, he looked at me, oh, we're in love. Well, that happened. And my Prince Charming was not a Prince Charming. And somewhere in there, you know, I got pregnant. I don't know how. Nobody talked about sex to me about any time, you know. So I had my daughter. The day before my birthday, and I gave her up for adoption. And you know, years later, my mom passed away a day after my birthday. You know, so there was a lot of sadness around my birthday, and I figured, you know, the heck with it. I'm going to change my birthday. So I changed it to February. Who writes this stuff, huh? My sobriety date ended up being in February, you know. So anyway, when we were growing up, my dad, like I said, was a very angry alcoholic, and he didn't know why. My dad was also a very, very educated man. When he was taken from his home at 3 years old, put in the residential school, and never got to go home again. And he left there when he was 18, 21 years old, because he wanted to finish his education. And he thought, and he said, these are his words, his own words, "I was brainwashed to think that the residential school was good for Indian children." And, you know, I always remember him saying that. And when he was going to graduate, or to become, he decided he wanted to become a priest. You know, we're with the Anglican thing, the Anglican fellowship, and he was going to be an Anglican priest. And when he realized that that's not really what he wanted to do, they had brainwashed him to thinking that, you know, and they take the ability to say no away from the children. You know, if you say no, you were beat. If you misbehaved, you were beaten. If you did anything, you know, looked sideways at anybody, you were beaten. And when Leon was talking about the shower, you know, standing in the hot water, I went, ooh, you know, because I got that sudden memory. I got into trouble, and my punishment was a toothbrush and cleaning every little, you know, the little wee tiles. And it was like a 10-stall shower, so it was a pretty big room, but I had to finish cleaning every tile in that shower, you know. So it was, I was pretty stubborn. Somebody said last night, you know, in our misadventures, during our alcoholism, you know, I said, oh, that's a cute word to describe our drunken behavior. My misadventures. Well, my misadventures, you know, got me a daughter. And then when I was 18 years old, I had a son, and I raised my son till he was about 4 or 5 years old, drinking all the way, you know, of course, and he dropped a cup on the floor and the handle broke off. And I was so angry at him. I turned around and I was going to hit him full fist in the, you know, and I stopped myself because I saw my dad in me. And that terrified me. So I called my mom. You know, they'd already split up by then. Oh, there's a funny story with that one too. But let me finish this one. When I called my mom and I told her what had happened, and she said, well, bring him over here. Bring your baby over here. And I said, okay. So I took him over. And she says, leave him here until you're done drinking, okay? And I said, oh, okay. And I left and I went partying on down the road. I didn't realize that she meant done drinking that weekend. You know how we we hear what we want to hear and we do what we want to do, huh? So I was still visiting my son at my mother's 10 years later, you know, because I wasn't done drinking yet. So anyway, and I'd fain go picking him up, you know, I'll take him home now. She said, he's already started school, leave him here. Oh, yeah, but you know how we can feign anger. Oh, darn, I was going to take him home. You know, but in my inventory during the, you know, process of, you know, wreaking, where we wreak havoc, you know, we have to look at that. And today I can admit I was not a good mother. You know, I did what I did because I didn't know anything else to do. You know, I gave up my daughter for adoption because I was terrified of my dad. You know, he would have killed both me and my mom, I'm sure, in a drunken rage. Because, you know, I was an embarrassment. So, anyway, backing up a little bit, my dad got sober 17 years before I got sober. And during that time, you know, my mom had moved in with this other guy, and I introduce him this way because he is disdainful. He bought her a house, you know, and Saturday, she came home from school, and she says, on Friday, and she said, okay, kids, pack your stuff because we're moving. And I'm like, well, what about Dad? She said, well, he's not coming. She said, I'm leaving him for good. And I was going, yay. You know, but secretly, I was going, but then who's going to look after him? You know, I was kind of being pulled. So we packed up our stuff and our few sticks of furniture, and we moved into this nice house, you know, and I'm like, wow, she must have been playing bingo or something on one of the big So, excuse me, anyway, the next morning, I got up to make coffee, and the kitchen door opens, and in walks this short little guy in a, you know, boxer shorts and a t-shirt. And I looked at him and I said, who the hell are you? And then my mom came in and she goes, oh, this is Roy. He's going to be your stepdad. My stepdad came with the house. You know, so I'm like, well, yeah, right. You know, I didn't like him from the beginning. There was something about him I didn't trust. There was something, you know, you just can't put your finger on it. I didn't know what it was. And I kept my distance. And we'd have some down outright fights, fist fights, you know. And finally, after a few months of this, because he tried to ground me, and I'm like, yeah, right. Crawling out the window and away I go, you know. So, you know, after a few months of fist fighting with me, he just gave up, you know, and go do whatever you want to do. I don't care, he said, you know. So I did. And then one night they were drinking at the house, and I told my mom I was going to bed, you know, and he said, well, good night, we'll talk to you in the morning, right? And he tried to kiss me, you know, right on the mouth, and ooh, you know, French kissed me, and I'm like, oh my God, is that God? God is calling. Hello. I'm doing good, really I am. So he tried to kiss me, and I just, and that's what it was, you know, that I couldn't put my finger on. And I left home, you know, I just, and you know, I didn't know whether to tell my mom or not, because she was happy, you know, she was doing what she wanted to do, and, you know, she was working, she was working with the Manitoba Indian Brotherhood at the time, and, you know, traveling, and she just was, she had 5 kids. She was the director of family planning. So, and she traveled to the reserves up north, and, you know, doing, you know, education there with the native people on the reservations. And she loved it. So I didn't want to burst that bubble, you know, by telling her that this guy tried to kiss me, you know, and would she believe me? She'd get mad at me. You know, all these things are internal, and I decided not to tell her. I'll just leave home and it'll stop here, you know, and I did. And I left with that secret. And I have three younger sisters, you know, thinking maybe it was me, maybe it's the way I dressed, maybe something, you know, and I learned later in life that, you know, through understanding sexual child abuse, that we internalize these things. And I didn't do anything wrong, and it wasn't my fault. And, you know, after a few years, I drank for, till I was 38 years old, you know, and doing what we do out there in the real world, you know, for that next drink. I always worked. And it always happened that I would get a job where we would travel, you know, and it always involved drinking, and, you know, the clients, we have to be nice to the clients, and, you know, ply them with liquor, you know. And I worked for chief and council, you know, many years ago, for 15 years, and, you know, traveling. I was hired as the secretary, and I rearranged the band office, and they they sent me to the trap line because I couldn't speak, you know, the English. I mean, I couldn't speak Cree very well, and we were, you know, having the chief and council meeting, and I was there to take minutes of the meeting. And they were all talking in Cree, and the chief looks at me and he goes, "Aren't you supposed to be writing something down?" I said, "Well, yeah, I'm waiting for you to start the meeting." He said, "We did 5 minutes ago." I said, "In English?" He said, "We don't do that. This is our homeland." He said, "So we use our language." And I went, "Oh, well, that's going to be a problem." So they stopped the meeting. I said, get a tape recorder, and, you know, they recorded the meeting, 3 days of meeting, and I had an interpreter where I could type the minutes up in English, you know, and it took me 2 weeks, and I was just there visiting, but, you know, their secretary disappeared. You know, when we drink, we go. We disappear when we drink. So, and she never came back for a couple of weeks. So while I was there, I was, you know, typing up these minutes, and, you know, when I was done that, you know, I handed them in, and, you know, I went to secretarial school when I was 18 or 19 or something, so I knew how to type up minutes and type up, you know, the band council resolutions and all those things. So he really liked the way I did them, and he said, "Well, you're already here now, why don't you just stay?" Oh, okay. So I stayed. You know, they were back in the 80s, the early 80s, you know, $25 an hour was like, wow. Yeah. No tax because it was on reservation land, you know, and I went, oh, yeah. I, you know, didn't have to pay rent, you know, so it was cash going to the bar. So I, you know, and I worked there for 15 years. My dad, in the meantime, got sober and started working with the, in Canada, it's Medical Services. It's a division of Indian Affairs. And his deal was, when he was first getting sober, I'll work here for a year, I'll stay on, you know, social income or whatever it's called, he said, and I'll work here for a year, he said, and if you like my work, he said, then you'll hire me. And they agreed. So he stayed sober, went to work every day, collected his monthly social allowance or whatever it's called. And at the end of that year, he was still sober, they liked his work, so they hired him. And he retired from that job. Wow. He retired from that job. And, but he was with the NADAP, Native Alcohol and Drug Abuse Programs in northern Manitoba. So the chief and council I was working with, working for, I should say, you know, we were traveling to chiefs' conventions and stuff like that, and they decided north of 53, I think, parallel, north of 53, there were no Cree Native treatment centers. So all the Cree people who wanted to get sober had to go south to either Sioux Valley, which is Lakota, or the Soto treatment centers. And, you know, we don't play well with others. So the northern chiefs got together and they decided, you know, to put in proposals and have one built up north. So, okay, that was it. We got money for training that first year, and, you know, they went, I researched, because I was their bookkeeper. So I did research and found, I don't know if any of you have heard of Alkali Lake. It's in northern Edmonton. You know, I arranged for the two people that we were going to hire for the program to go there for training. You know, because it's cultural immersion and, you know, drug and alcohol abuse, counseling, and all those things thrown into one. So they went there for 6-8 weeks or something, and then they came back. And then they decided that they wanted to put in a proposal so that we, on the res, might be able to get the treatment center there, you know. And so I helped with that proposal, and we got the money. We got, for the spring, they could start building the treatment center. And the coordinator come running in. He says, "Sharon, we got the money. We can start building the treatment center. You will be our first client." I said, "What?" I quit my job and I left. I was terrified when he said that. You know, I've grown up with alcohol almost every day in my life. I have friends in alcoholism, you know. What am I supposed to do? And I just could not fathom my life without alcohol. Anyway, I ran, and I moved back to the city in Winnipeg, and drank, of course. Prince Charming, whoever, is always around the corner, right? So we always find them. And and each one that I found got more violent, and, you know, ended up being closer to my dad when he was drinking, you know. 'Cause, well, you know, we know what we know, right? I don't know how to be in that kind of a relationship. So anyway, the last guy that I was with, we got into this terrible fight. He accused me of being an alcoholic, that drunk. Oh, I was so mad at him. And we ended up in a big fist fight. And as I was walking away, I didn't know what happened, but I just went black, you know. And next thing I know, I was in the hospital. And the police were there, and they were saying, you know, you need to press charges. I said, why? What happened? How can I press charges if I didn't know what happened? And they told me that I was hit in the back of the head with a 2x4 with a rusty nail on it. He said, had it been just a few fractions over, he would have hit my big artery. He said, you wouldn't be here today. You know, and I was thinking, if I charge him, he's going to go to jail. Will I have access to his account? I could buy lots of booze. You know, and I'm thinking, no. And he'll be mad at me, and you know how we are, ladies. We abuse ladies, you know. So, so anyway, I said I was too afraid. And he said, that's okay, we'll do it then, you know, because they have the duty to protect. I was not to go around this man. There was what do you call that, restraining order. And so I went to my friends after I got out of the hospital. And of course we partied, and I had this great big bandage on the back of my head, you know, and that came off a few hours later after it stopped bleeding. And I'm like, how embarrassing, you can't go to the bar like that. So anyway, I ended up, he called me and said, you know, we need to talk. And I said, okay. He said, let's go out to dinner. I said, okay. And so we met. Of course, you know what, when you go to dinner, you're still drinking, right? You know what that means. We drank a lot that night. And of course, you know, the honeymoon was on, and you know, everything was okay, and we went home, and he went to work at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I woke up, and I was home alone, you know, and I was hearing things. I was seeing things. you know, and I was just watching everybody running around, and there was nobody in the house but me. And, you know, all these little people running around, you know, and lots of noise around, like high-pitched screaming, and, you know, I couldn't figure it out. And I had this big drink beside me by my bed, and I looked at it, and it said, "Drink me, you know you want to drink me, you'll feel better." I sat on my hands, and I said, "No." And I didn't know what to do. And I was so terrified, and all these things were running around. And one thing that I was always afraid of, because I've heard of these places, you know, the rubber room, being thrown in the loony bin and nobody will come and get me, you know, and I'd be stuck there. That was my deepest fear, you know, and because my Prince Charming hasn't found me yet. And my prayer, my drunken prayer was, "Creator, send me a man who works in a brewery where I won't have to work and I'll be happy." That's all I ask. You know, right? She knows. So, anyway, that night sitting on the bed, sitting on my hands, rocking back and forth, trying to figure out what to do. And, you know, I sat there for 2 hours. I didn't even go to the bathroom. I was so afraid. And I was watching the clock, you know, and it was going 1 minute to 9. You know, when I reached 9 o'clock, I called my dad. And I hadn't talked to him in a few months because I was drinking. And I called him and I said, "Dad." And he said, "What's going on?" I said, "I'm seeing things. I'm hearing things." And he said, "Are you ready? Are you drinking now?" And I said, "No." I said, "But it's screaming at me." I said, "It's really screaming at me." He said, "Don't touch it." "Are you ready to do something about your drinking now?" And here's how profound we are, right? In 2 seconds, I had this big plan. You know, he's got to find a treatment center for me, someplace posh, you know, because my sisters went and they talked about it. One went to San Diego or someplace, and the other went somewhere else, and they described it, and I went, "Wow, I'm the oldest girl. I need someplace nicer than that." So he, anyway, and then he'll have to find a plane ticket, which will probably take about 2 weeks. Then I have to go around and say goodbye to all my friends because, you know, I'm going to quit drinking. They're going to miss me. I won't see them again. So in those 2 seconds, I had all that planned out. And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Pack your bags, I'll come get you in 20 minutes. What? What? And I hung up on him. I'll show him, huh? Anyway, 20 minutes later, he was knocking on my door. And I opened the door. I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Are you ready?" I said, "For what?" And he said, "We're going to do something about your drinking." And I said, "Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah." You know, so I said, "Okay." So anyway, off I went. And he, you know, and I didn't really understand what divine intervention was until I came to this program. And all the things that happened to us, why are we still here? You know, I could have, should have died so many times, you know, drinking the way I did, hanging around with the people I hung around with, and, you know, doing the things that we do for either companionship or, you know, being afraid to, you know, do whatever, you know. So that's, you know, learning what divine intervention was part of my journey. My dad put me on a plane to Toronto, sending me to my 2 younger sisters. there's a conspiracy here because my sisters told me not to call them anymore when I was drinking. My youngest sister told me this. She said, "Sharon, please don't call us anymore when you're drinking. It affects my sobriety." And I said, "You little bitch." Well, I guess you won't be hearing from me anymore because I drink every day, you know. and I hung up on her. And this was like 6 months earlier, and my dad was sending me to her. And I'm like, oh my God, he's really in, you know, they have it in for me, you know. And I didn't know anybody else in Toronto but those two sisters of mine. The youngest one, Cynthia, she was 6 months sober, I think, at the time. And my other sister, who really should be here, or at least Al-Anon. You know, she says there's nothing wrong with her. You know, I said, well, of course there is. You were raised with us. You know, but she found her outlet was education. And she would go early to school, stay late, and you know, that was her sanctuary. And you know, when I got sober, no, when was it? When I was turning 25 years sober, she was still in school, for God's sakes. That was like 20 years, 20 years of university. You know, she'd sign up for majors, for courses, and then, you know, halfway through she'd change, and then she'd go another 4 years and change, and then she was a professional student. That's what she is. Now she's going for her PhD. In what? I don't know, but PhD in something. But she's still very, very angry, you know, and I go, whatever, you know, it's your life. So, anyway, I got sober going to this younger sister of mine, and I walked in the house and she said, don't even unpack, we're going to a meeting. And I went, well, you know, okay. And she was doing a lot of meetings, you know, in both fellowships, and I realized why later. But we went to the meeting of the other fellowship that Friday night, and let me tell you, I was shocked. In Toronto, I mean, I guess out here is no different, really. You get some real weird people on the street. But it's right on Queen Street, you know, and it was a candlelight meeting. So, of course, you know, when everybody gets settled and sit around, they turn the lights off, and all these candles are going, and I'm like, oh my God, what is she into now? You know, what kind of a cult is she bringing me to? I sat in the corner and listened, and, you know, keeping an eye on her, because you never know what these people are going to do in the dark, you know. So, but I was listening to what they were talking about, you know, and they were talking about feelings and how they were feeling today and what they do to deal with all these feelings. You know, I thought, oh my God, how can they talk about these things in public? You know, so anyway, I made it through that meeting. They wanted to hug me, and, you know, I was, no, don't touch me, you know. And then we went to an AA meeting the next day. It was the Honesty group. And it was a little farther down the street on Queen Street. But it was situated between, it was in a YMCA hostel, if you know what a hostel is. I never knew what that was. But anyway, there we were in the basement, and then all these people started filing in. There was a men's treatment center half a block away, a women's treatment center about 2 blocks away, and, you know, people off the street were coming in for coffee, and whoever brings donuts or whatever. And it was a very aromatic meeting. I'm telling you. It's like, but, you know, I stayed through the meeting. I joined that meeting. I joined that group because through listening to what was being said, you know, I heard vigorous honesty, you know, and the group that I went to the night before was There Comes a Time, you know, and that in my getting here, that line was very prevalent. I kept hearing it, at different places. There comes a time. Well, there will be a time. Oh, this one time. It's like, okay. So all these little things started happening, and I was putting it together. I never did get to that posh treatment center, because I was going to meetings, and I wasn't working, because I didn't know anything in Toronto except to go to meetings, and that's what I did. I went to 3 or 4 meetings a day. I couldn't sleep at night or early in the morning, so I went to a 7 o'clock meeting, a noon meeting, a 4 or 5 o'clock meeting, and then 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening meeting, and that was my daily routine for months. And then at 3 months sober, the counselor called me and they said, "We found a bed for you if you still want to go." I said, "Well, yeah, of course I want to go. I want to see what I'm missing." So I went to treatment in Windsor, Ontario, and it was with 17 women, stark, raving, sober women. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I done? What have I done to me? But I was stuck there because, Indian Affairs was paying for it, and they only pay one way, because if you don't finish, you don't get the return, right? And I'm like, that's blackmail, isn't it? And I was smoking then, so I had 2 packages of cigarettes, and I had like $5 or $6, and the taxi itself I had money to pay for the taxi from the bus to there, and I had $6 or something change. The taxi was $9. So even if I wanted to leave, I couldn't afford to leave. So I ended up staying. It was Sunday, so I was early, and I was walking back and forth and smoking a cigarette. What am I going to do? Do I really want to stay? Do I, And when I finally rang the doorbell, this little woman comes running up the stairs, and she says, "Oh, I'm so glad you're here." And I was, "Oh, really? Well, come in," she says. And we went downstairs, and she said, "This is Sharon." She said she's going to stay. And oh, I'm so glad I'm so glad you're going to stay. You just won me $35. I said, "What?" She said, "Oh yeah." She said, "We always bet when we see people walking back and forth. Is she going to stay? Is she leaving? Is she going to stay? I bet she's going to stay." You just won me $35. Well, do I get a cut? No. So anyway, I stayed with the program for a 28-day program, and on the last day, they were sending me. It was a Friday. But the 28th day was Saturday, and I thought, oh my God, what did I do wrong? Why can't I finish the program, So anyway, she says, your home group meets tomorrow. If you leave tomorrow, you won't be able to make it. And I went, oh, I see, okay. So anyway, I went back to Toronto and, continued meetings the way I was, and I got a job with Native Child and Family Services as the receptionist, and because that's what I've always done, and within a month, I couldn't. This invisible chain, my ankle to the desk. I was a secretary with the chief and council. I have my own secretary, for God's sakes. I can't do this chain thing. So but I always knew that you had to have something in line before you leave, right? So that's how I did men too, so what the heck. Why change now? So I, across the fax machine, remember fax machines? Yeah. This information came about a new training program for Native people, Native First Nations people. You had to, the qualifications were you had to have a band affiliation, 1 year sober, and, and I had those. So I went and applied, and they refused me because I was overqualified, and I went, what? I said, if I don't do this, I'll drink again. I said, I don't want to drink, but I can't work where I was working before. I can't do that job, that kind of work anymore. And when I left there, I was so, disheartened. And I didn't know what I was going to do. But when I got home, the phone was ringing. Yeah, we still had phones on the walls. The phone was ringing. And it was one of the elders that was on that council. And she said, we'd like you to come back for a second interview. And I said, when? She said, tomorrow. I said, can I come today? So I went back the next day, and we went through the whole interview process again, and they accepted me for that program. And it was the Aboriginal Justice Counseling Program. And you can graduate in 3 different areas, and one was drug and alcohol counselor. The other was the Ontario Correctional in the jails, working in the jails, Native Inmate Liaison, and the other was in the court system, clerk of the courts or something like that for Native people, because our people are always in jail, and the recidivism is very, very high. So working as a in that department would allow me to work with our Native inmates, men and women coming out of jail or going into jail, and but what I knew best was alcoholism. I knew how to function in it, So, but what I learned in that program and through that, the elder that taught the drug and alcohol component of it. She became my teacher. I asked her if she would be my teacher. And she said, well, not this year. She said, maybe next, when you finish with this program, conflict of interest and all that. But I went, well, all righty. So I finished that program. And towards the last 2 weeks, I started coming late. I started leaving early. And she called me in one afternoon and said, what the hell are you doing? I said, what? She said, you're not looking after yourself here. And I said, what do you mean? So of course she had all these things written down and knocked them off all like that. You're late, you leave early, you don't help out, you don't do all these things you used to do all year. It was a 52-week program. And she said, what's the matter with you? Don't you want to graduate? And I said, well, of course I do. She said, well, then quit dragging your feet. Pull up your socks and, do all these things. And I said, well, okay. So anyway, I graduated. And there were 35 students that started off this program a year ago, and there were 8 of us that finished the 52-week program. And only 2 of us graduated with the full designation of Aboriginal Justice Counselor. And that was myself and another woman. And my dad at the time was, 18, 19 years sober. He came to my graduation. And my biggest complaint to this old lady, to the old lady, I just called her the old lady, was he never said he loved me. And she looked at me and she said, maybe he doesn't know how. Maybe he's afraid of you. She said, you don't know unless you ask him. And I said, why would he be afraid of me? She said, because you're the oldest. You're the memory of what happened. You protected your younger sisters and your brother through all that. And he lived in a 10-year blackout, remember? I was like, so yeah, my dad was afraid of me. Not afraid of me, but afraid of, what I know. And anyway, he came to my graduation, and the old lady was watching him, and seeing our interaction, and I just said, I can't believe I did it, Dad. And he just looked at me and he said, you done it, kid. You done good. And she come up to me after and she said, that's his I love you. And I went, oh my God, that's, because ability was taken away from him from the residential school. You know, that showing of affection that's so big in our communities, that was taken away from him. You know, and I sometimes wonder today, and I was so angry at the residential schools when I was getting sober. Why did they have to exist? Why all this? Why? What if they never existed? Why, you know, what if all this? And then I go, would I be standing here today? Would I even exist in this world had they not been there and done what they did? You know, because my mom and dad both went to residential school. That's where they met. Yeah, and they fell in love. My mom passed away when I was 25. We buried her back home, and my dad asked if he could come to the funeral. And I said, well, wouldn't your present wife mind? And she said, oh no. He said, she knows that I loved your mom wholeheartedly, and she understands. And I said, well, okay, if it's, you're not going to cause a problem. And, you know, he came to the funeral. He asked if he could spend a few minutes alone with her to make his amends. And then and we buried her there, and he was there beside us. And, you know, those were his living amends to us. And I understand that today. He also used to say, you know, I prayed for 17 years for you to come to this program and to get sober. And I never understood what that meant. You know, I just, yeah, right, you know, isn't that what you're supposed to do anyway because I'm your daughter? But I have a sister today who's, she's living in Edmonton. Well, she said to say hello to everybody here, and she sends her love. She's ill. She needs a double lung transplant. She's a year sober now. She got sober a year ago in June. You know, so I've been praying for her for 28 years to get here. So now I understood what my dad meant when he said that. You know, I prayed you in here for 17 years. So yeah, she took a little longer to get done, but you know, she's here. She's going to meetings there. She's, you know, doing a wonderful thing for herself there, and she's sober. My youngest sister passed away 10 years ago. You know, and the bafflingness of this program and alcoholism. You know, she tried for so long to get sober. She'd get a year, she'd drink. She'd get 2 years, she'd drink. She'd get a year, you know, she'd get a few months and she'd drink. And when I was 5 years sober, you know, we learn about self-centeredness in this program. Sometimes the hard way. I was 5 years sober, and I called my dad to see if he would come to my 5-year celebration. And he said, well, honey, he said, I'll be there next month for your sister's 1-year anniversary. I said, well, Dad, she's already had about 6 or 7 anniversaries. I said, I'm 5 years sober. Why can't you come to me? And he said, yes, many 1-year anniversaries. Don't you think she needs our support? As it went from... I was about an inch tall, and I said, yeah, you're right. You know, so he didn't come to my 5-year, but, you know, he came, and we all went out for dinner, blah, blah. And then, you know, one of the stories that I when I talk about self-centeredness, oh, are you sure? It's not the other guy, is it? So when I was first getting sober in Toronto, I met a guy, not that way. I met an AA buddy who was from Winnipeg. and he was in Toronto. And he was my running buddy for a while, and he'd come pick me up, and we'd go. And he said, "Hey," he said, "how about next Saturday we'll go to a Little Italy meeting?" He said, "I'll pick you up." And I said, "Okay." So he pulls up on this bike, and I thought, well, okay, that's cool. What do I know about motorcycles, huh? So anyway, we pull up to this meeting in Little Italy, and the Italian jocks are standing around, their gold chains, and they see us pulling up, and they come around, we walking over, and they said, "Hey, John," he said, "oh, it's so good to see you." He said, "Where'd you get the old Indian?" I'm sitting on the back of the bike, and I'm like, what? My head, I'm going, what? How dare they? They don't even know who I am. Who the hell do they think they're talking to? Blah, blah, blah. And as I got off the bike and I started walking away because I was very indignant, and they went towards the bike. It was an old Indian motorcycle. I said, well, I'm glad I didn't retort too loudly at that one. I said, yeah, self-centered to the extreme, of course we are. So in my walk of sobriety, the first year of sobriety was getting to know Toronto, finding out where the Indians hang out. And I went to a Wednesday night meeting, and I met another elder there, and he heard about Indians in sobriety in Cherokee, North Carolina. So away he went, and he came back, and he was so excited. "You got to come next year." So I went with him the next year. That was 28 years ago. I'm still going twice a year. And, I saw this 50-50 bucket on the table, and I said, "Why isn't anybody selling 50-50 tickets?" He said, "Well, they're right there." I said, and they said, "Well, here, go." So that's what I do still today, selling 50-50 tickets. They trust me with other people's money, so that was my niche in there, and I love doing it. And, it's part of my sobriety. It's my grounding when I go there to the mountains. And it's like going home. I met my husband down there, and he's circling the wagons. Okay. So we got married, and we still walk together. The first year we were joined at the hip, and then second year it was like, okay, go your way. And we go our way, and we come back together. And, we walk this walk together. He's got his program, I got my program, and it's a wonderful life. Sobriety is a wonderful life, and I'm, truly, truly happy today. Remember my prayer? Send me a guy who works in my drunken prayer? Well, when I met my husband, I said, "Where do you work?" "I work at Anheuser-Busch." "I'm 5 years sober." "Now you send him to me." "Thank you." And when I moved down here, treaty, our treaty act, well, I couldn't work without a social security number. So that was a 4-year adventure. It was a misadventure on the government's part. So it took me 4 years to get a social security number in order to work legally down here. And, traveling back and forth to get documents and all that stuff. So here I was, met my guy who works in a brewery. I can't work, and geez, I'm happy. It's like, who writes this stuff? We had no inkling. And when I was unpacking my stuff, my things that I brought with me, putting my dishes away, he goes, "Where'd you get those?" I said, "They're my mother's." So he shared his. His mother and my mother had the same dish. So now we have a complete set. So it's one of these things, divine intervention is, and my list of what I want in a partner must have teeth, store-bought or your own, but must have teeth, travel the red road or willing to learn. AA, and you will not hit me or I'll kill you. All these things, my list of things I want in a partner. Well, he's got them all. And we're happy. And, if it wasn't for AA and the cultural journey that I've been on, we probably wouldn't have survived each other otherwise. And I've heard that in so many people and couples that meet in AA, because we're people that usually wouldn't drink together or survive drinking together or whatever, So anyway, I want to thank you all for staying and listening to me. Thank you, committee, for inviting me. And, it's a trip. Life is a trip today, and I miigwech how. Oh, she's bringing me presents. The perks of AA, huh?